Welcome to the Threshold Podcast, where we sit down with prayer leaders from all over to share their unique perspectives on prayer. Our hope is to learn from their experiences and insights to deepen our prayer life and to create cultures of prayer that transform lives and communities. Whether you've been a prayer leader for decades or you're learning to pray for the very first time, this is the place for you. Thanks for joining us. Let's jump in.
Hey, Threshold gang. Nice to have you with us again. We're doing another Threshold podcast, and we have Bonnie Lloyd here with us again. Welcome, Bonnie.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So good to have you with us today. We're going to continue to dive into Bonnie's story a little bit, get to know her better and learn from her, because she's one of the strong prayer leaders here in Phoenix. So, Bonnie, I'm going to dive right into it, if that's okay.
Let's go.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey in prayer, if you would.
Okay. Well, I was raised in a Christian home, so I was real familiar with prayer. And on a side note, my parents were educators. Okay. So I grew up on Indian reservations, Tohono O'odham, Apache, Hopi. I actually have an Apache brother.
Really?
Yeah, 1 month older than I am.
Okay.
So that has been such an interesting journey. Love him to pieces. But I remember I was in about third grade, and my mom would come in and say bedtime prayers with us kids. And don't ask me where I got this, but I had a burning desire for a monkey. So I decided, it just looked impossible. Like, I only saw monkeys at the zoo, you know. So I decided I would pray. And of course, I'd been trained. God answers prayer, right? So it was my time to pray during bedtime prayers. And I said, and God, I pray that you'll give me a monkey. And my mom interrupted my prayer, which she never had done. She said, now, we're not going to pray that way. She said, that's just not a prayer. I just don't think that the Lord wants you to pray that prayer. I don't think he wants to answer that prayer. She was really firm about it. And she did not want a monkey, by the way. And so, I mean, of course, I didn't say a word. But in my heart, I said to God, you heard me. And I mean it. So I kept praying silently that I really wanted this monkey. And for some reason, I felt like God could do it. So because we were on the reservation, we would come to Phoenix every couple of weeks to do shopping. There was a lot more variety here in the Valley. And so we would stay at a certain hotel when we came to town. And my parents just knew the proprietors. So one weekend, we pulled up to the hotel, and the proprietor came out and put his head through the driver's window and said, hey guys, how's it going? Well, I have some bad news. You know, we're needing to sell and we're going to move out of state. Then he said, and by the way, like jokingly, do you know anybody who wants a monkey? I don't even need to tell you how ecstatic I was. Yeah. And my mom could not say no because she knew I'd been praying about it. So we ended up with this spider monkey called Coco.
Okay.
And do you know, that imprinted me for life.
Yeah.
So I would say, so I just kind of had a normal childhood when it comes to prayer. But when I got between junior high and high school age, it's like I woke up spiritually. And I just had this hunger. I just wanted to know God. I just felt like I needed so many answers. So I would, the street behind us had a church with a basement. And there was this stairwell that went down to the basement. And, you know, it was pretty empty most of the time. And I felt like I could go there and be alone and pray and not be distracted, not be interrupted. So that would be like my little getaway. Uh-huh. Walk through the alley, sit in the stairwell, and just, you know, have time with God. So, but then I remember I was in college, and I can even tell you where I was standing. You know those minutes when the Lord talks to you and out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And the Lord spoke to me about Bible college. So I was in Grand Canyon University at the time. And I just knew beyond a shadow of a doubt I was at a crossroads. And the Lord was prompting me to go to Bible college. So long story short, I did. And my first semester, I was in a 2-bedroom apartment with 5 gals.
Oh,
okay,
my.
now just imagine this. There were 2 other gals in my bedroom. And again, it was a God thing because they wanted to learn how to pray. So we made this pact. We would get up early enough that we could go. We were in a dicey part of town where the Bible college was. Women weren't supposed to be out at dark. So we would get up together early enough that we could go to the main auditorium where our first session was held an hour early. Then we'd all split off, find a prayer spot, and then pray for that hour and then come back together. Do you know what? We're still friends all these years later. But that semester really shaped me, that time in prayer. Then the next semester, I got into a choral group, a worship group, and we prayed an hour in the morning every weekday. So I had a love-hate relationship with that.
Yeah.
Okay, I loved it because I could sense God's presence, but I hated it because I felt so vulnerable. I didn't feel like I knew how to pray. And it's a small group and you had to pray out loud.
Yeah.
And so I was stretched and it was really painful. And so I wanted to be there, but I didn't. Interesting little side note about that meeting. If you were late, like 2 times in the semester, you were kicked out of the group.
Oh, wow.
So it was like they were serious about prayer. You just showed up. But, and then after Bible college, a girlfriend I had gone to Bible college with, she and I smuggled Bibles into Eastern Europe, so that I'm going to give my age away. So it was back when the Iron Curtain was up, and we prayed a lot. So we prayed that we wouldn't get caught. We prayed we wouldn't get lost because, we're in countries we don't know the language. We would pray for the families that we were delivering the Bibles to. And we'd pray for the people who were so oppressed. So, yeah.
So what Bible college did you go to?
Christ for the Nations.
Okay.
In Dallas.
In Dallas, okay.
Yeah.
And what countries did you smuggle Bibles into?
Bulgaria, Romania, back when Yugoslavia was one country, Hungary, just the whole Eastern Bloc.
Wow, very
Yeah.
cool. Bonnie, you've got quite the background. So if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about what does prayer look like for you?
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have to discipline myself to make sure I have a balance of the word in my prayer life. So the easiest things for me to do is either worship or pray. And depending upon my circumstances, right? Things are going great. I'm worshiping. I'm just honest. But, or I can launch right into prayer. And when I pray, I really endeavor to discipline myself to start, like obey that command, enter his gates with thanksgiving. So not just rush in with my petitions, but really like govern myself to spend the time focused on who God is. So I pray from the right perspective. And so that I'm just by the time you start giving thanks and you're worshiping, you're letting go of stress and you just pray differently. You know how that is. So, but it's really important to me that I get kind of equal parts. It's like nutrition, equal parts of worship, the word, and then prayer. So I work at that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Do you have a list that you pray through, or is it?
Okay, I have a list, but I don't always pray through it. So I'm one of those list makers, but it just feels so good to put it on paper and it's like, okay, I'm going to remember it, but I don't always pray down the list. Sometimes I do, but I don't always.
Okay. And does it look the same pretty much every day, or is it?
Nope.
It's different every day?
It's very different, yeah.
Okay.
I'll sit down and I'm like, I think I need the word right now.
Okay.
I think that's going to give me perspective on what I'm facing.
And do you do some listening in your prayer?
Yes, absolutely.
Describe that a little bit.
Okay. It's interesting because sometimes I feel like the Lord has to remind me to stop and listen. Okay. Remember, I know all those needs before you ask. Okay, I really want to talk to you about, and usually it's something unrelated to my list or unrelated to what I want to pray about, right?
Yeah.
And he just finally gets my attention. He's like, so I'm asking you for guidance about XYZ, but you want to talk to me about PQR. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So he just, as you just listen, he just brings things into your mind. Is that how it works? That you feel like you need to work
Yes,
through more?
or like if I'm reading the word, something just pops out of the word, and I just feel like I need to stop and listen to what the Lord is saying to me about this.
Okay, that's good. Bonnie, you're a prayer pastor. Tell us a
Yes.
little bit about that.
Okay. So I was actually hired on as a global outreach pastor. And at the time, I was very, very entrenched in refugee resettlement. And missions is just my passion. But like I said on an earlier podcast, how can you do missions without prayer and vice versa? So I was organizing these prayer gatherings for the nations. And then I would come into our campus pastors meeting and I would share about the prayer gatherings. And in one such meeting, the pastor just looked at me and he said, I really think you have the anointing for prayer at the church. And I, to your point, as we had said earlier, you kind of have that sense when you pray, the Lord gives you a heads up to things that are coming down the pike. So I had that sense that, I think prayer might be added to my plate at some point. So I jumped at it. And I just got really excited because I thought, man, global outreach is going to take off. The more prayer grows at the church, then the more global outreach is going to grow.
Yeah.
So what does it look like? I would say that my number one responsibility is getting before the Lord to hear a strategy for where prayer is going in the church and then how I'm supposed to implement that strategy. That's number one.
Okay.
And of course, I don't do that in a vacuum. That's totally hand in glove with leadership. But after being at the church, like going on 16 years now, I pretty much know their heart and they are incredibly supportive. And my pastor is a man of prayer and he prioritizes prayer. Like he's crazy about it. I have kind of an ideal situation. But after I sense from the Lord the strategy and how to implement, my next responsibility is looking around for prayer leaders. So I never start something that I don't already have a leader in the chute, so to speak, preparing to lead that particular prayer event or meeting. So I look to grow leaders. And so I oversee the department, but there are layers of leaders in the department that are actually in the trenches doing the work, right? So we have what we call our Ignite Prayer School. It's a year long. There are 4 modules. Each module is 5 weeks long. And then we have like 3 weeks break or 4 in between each of the modules. So it gives people a chance to jump in anywhere during the year, learn about prayer. We say that they've graduated after they've gone for 1 year, which is 4 modules, but the curriculum actually changes every 2.5 years. So people can keep going, keep learning, even after they've graduated, because that's their tribe. Yeah. And we have people who do that. And within that prayer school, every module we have prayer clusters. So people get to know different intercessors in the church and pray for each other's needs. And sometimes they set up like chat groups with these prayer clusters and communicate during the week. So it's relationship building as well as giving leadership a chance to really get to know those who have an interest in prayer and growing prayer leaders.
So do you teach these?
So actually, no, I have a leader. They're team taught. Every module, I teach one class. Unless I could actually ask to teach a class, but every module I teach a class called Supporting the Vision of the House. And I have found over time, it's really important that new people coming into the church or new to the prayer department all get on the same page with the vision of the house. So it focuses on 6 principles for thriving in prayer ministry. And they're so simple, but they're so important to really look at openly together. And one is stay full. Ephesians 5:13, don't be drunk with wine. The Message Bible says, drink the Spirit of God, huge draughts of him. Isn't that good?
Yeah.
And, I felt like the Lord said to me, some things in your life will never be activated until you're saturated. So I don't think we can remind ourselves too much of that, especially intercessors, we all leak, but intercessors, we're giving out a lot. Secondly, stay planted. Psalm 92:13, those who are planted in the house of the Lord will flourish in the courts of our God. So what I often see, again, because intercessors will have these senses of what's going on in the church, is a person gets into the prayer ministry and they start to get these senses like, well, such and such ought to be changed about the children's ministry, or why are things being done this way in outreach? And then they're like, I don't know if I fit here anymore.
Yeah.
And then they're looking around at other churches. So I just talk about how important it is to stay on assignment. And one of the examples I use is NASA put a satellite up years ago, and I wish I knew the name of it. I don't. But they couldn't seem to get it into the right orbit. And they had sunk like a couple $1 billion on this satellite, and it was useless because they couldn't get it exactly where it needed to be. And I just say, how much has God invested in you? All we have to do is stay where he assigns us. Do you know?
That's good.
Okay, third principle, take cover. It's obvious, but with intercessors, it's really important. So what's the role of leaders? To protect and equip. So the more I'm under leadership, the more I'm protected and equipped. So I'm at a large church, as you know, and I'll have people say, but I can't get to know the leader. Do you know, that's one of my challenges here is I really don't know the leader. Well, naturally, there are going to be layers of leadership, just like in a big corporation, right? So I say to them, think of it this way. In Israel, there's an Iron Dome. You never see it. But if there's a missile attack, it's there. That's the senior pastor. If there's a missile attack, it's there. But there are all kinds of layers of covering after that Iron Dome, right? So there's a storm cellar, and if it's raining, there's an umbrella. Do you know what I'm saying? So find the covering that you need to be under, and then don't run between coverings because you'll get wet. It's like an umbrella in the rain. You'll get wet. Number 4 is exercise faith. Another, what we say, oh, that's a given, but it's really not. Because as you see things, you've got to make a choice. Am I going to see this from God's perspective and exercise faith? Am I going to see it from a human perspective and get frustrated and just burned out? 5th, walk in humility. And then we break down, what does humility mean? Do you know? It means not having to be right all the time, not having to defend ourselves, not having to get the visibility that we think we should. You know, humility is subtle. Do you know what I'm saying? So we break that out. And last, choose unity. So, I mean, the devil is boring actually, because he just has like 3 strings on his guitar and he's always like plucking one of them, you know, and division is one of them. So if we can cut him off at the knees right there, like we're so far ahead in the game. But at any rate, so our Ignite School of Prayer really helps train leaders. And I see it as the farm team from which we gather leaders.
So does everybody in the church go through this, or just your prayer team people?
If they want to be involved in any type of prayer leadership, they're required to be in some form of it. So we say at least one module. It depends upon what form of leadership, right? If you're going to be on the altar team, you've got to go through a module every year, one module per year. And we just think it's good to brush up and rub shoulders.
That's phenomenal. So how many people will be in this class, say?
40.
40 people.
30, 40 people, yeah.
Wow. So you're really building that prayer team.
Yes, we are. It's 5 years old this year.
Wow.
That's a huge milestone for us.
Yeah. And you don't teach except for one class. Nope. Amazing.
Yep. Amazing. And it's team taught. I just really feel so strongly about this, that we're a body. And some people have stronger teaching gifts. That doesn't matter. We need to hear from each person that has something in prayer that we can learn from.
Wow.
So, yeah.
I'm really interested in that, Bonnie. And sometime I'm going to, maybe on the side, I want to see what your curriculum actually is. I'd love to look at it.
I can send you an e-copy.
Oh, I'd love to see it.
Yeah, we have a binder.
Yeah. The rest of you, sorry, you can't have it. I'm the only one that gets it.
Okay, some of my other responsibilities in that capacity, we have an altar team that obviously pray for people who come forward at the close of a service. And there are 60 in that team, but they're broken up into 4 teams, right? So you pray twice a month, 2nd and 4th, or 1st, 3rd, and 5th Sundays of the month, 2 teams for the 9 a.m. service and 2 teams for the 11 o'clock service. So to me, I just love this team. I mean, they're so passionate about what they do, and they're really the voice and the compassion, of the pastoral team. So I love them. We'll have staff meetings and people will say, somebody came to me and they were prayed over by the prayer team at the altar, and praise reports all the time. We have weekly prayer gatherings, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday mornings. They're led by different teams. We have something called the Urgent Care Prayer Team. And that's when there's an accident, a sudden illness. I mean, they're a strike force. They go to prayer right away. We know that they are devoted. They have made a commitment. When that prayer request comes in, they stop. everything and pray. Of course, there's Phoenix Fire, Millennial Prayer Group. We have a bi-monthly Heartbeat for Israel prayer group. We're about to launch a once-a-month prayer for the nations. I know, overdue. We've gone in cycles on this. Team, got a leader now. And we do, every other month, we do an event, 12 hours, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. We call it One Day. Like better is one day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere. So it's harp and bowl. It's like a house of prayer. So it's pretty much 30-minute prayer and worship sets. I'm so excited about this. I love this day. This is like the highlight right now of prayer ministry for me. So what I love about it is it engages all the departments of the church. So I reached out to the men's ministry, and because I did not want this to be heavily led by women, and the pastor in charge of men's ministry sent me this guy, and he rocked it. Like he was not a professional prayer. Do you know what I'm saying? But he was so authentic. He was so earnest. He got up there and started crying and praying his heart out. It was like we were undone.
Yeah.
So we were like, you've got to come back, Louis. You're awesome. So then he comes back with a buddy. And I just want to throw this in here for all you prayer leaders. Never do anything alone. Never, never. Always be bringing someone with you. You're so good at this, Paul. Always take someone with you that you're mentoring, right? So anyway, I look forward to his session. Like you never know where it's going to go, but it's going to be good. And we have a Facebook page. Now, again, that's not my thing, but we have someone who's part of the prayer team who monitors that. And then you have all the questions as to how open do you make the page and who do you allow to post and all of that type of thing. But we have an administrator that kind of is a gatekeeper there.
Yeah.
But that's the way some people really connect.
Bonnie, how do you have time to do anything in global? You got so much going on in prayer.
Do you know there was an advantage during COVID because I could really totally focus on prayer because we couldn't go anywhere.
Yeah, it's good. A couple of thoughts I had. I think prayer ministry is effective when you give it away, which we've talked a little bit about. But what I mean by that is, as long as something is your vision or my vision, it's not as effective as when it becomes somebody else's vision. It's their ministry.
Yes.
And they're coming up with the dreams that's when you've got real ministry going on. It's not when, I've got this idea, I want to do this, and you guys come along and help me kind of thing. So it's one of the things I love about you, Bonnie, is you're really good at giving that vision away and letting other people do and lead. And so that's really powerful. So great stuff. Man, I did not realize all the things you guys are doing. You got some great stuff going on. Well,
It's so much fun.
You need to be leading Threshold conferences.
No, I don't think so. Do you know, as we said, some people are really called to teach. And you've got the call, Paul.
Oh, well, thanks. Anyway, Bonnie, then obviously there's been some challenges with your role. So let's talk a little bit about those.
Okay. Well, I would say keeping our leaders connected, affirmed, and encouraged. So very intentionally, this year we're going to have quarterly meetings. There has to be that in-person connectedness. It's just not the same any other way. Encouraged, the more involved you become in prayer leadership, the bigger a target you are to the enemy. And so the more prone perhaps to discouragement or frustration. So I have to always keep an eye on my leaders to see who is getting attacked by discouragement. It's just another one of those strings of the devil, right? Yeah. So what I try to do is point them forward and point them toward the progress. Because what do we usually look at? Yeah. Like what hasn't worked yet or what hasn't happened yet instead of what God has done. And God has done a lot. That's the beauty, of being in a position for a while. You can look backwards and say, oh, wow, we've come a long way.
Yeah.
So
what about, Bonnie, while you're thinking this a little bit more, obviously being a woman, what kind of challenges have you had there being the prayer pastor of a church?
So the challenge is I can easily recruit women. I mean, I just have that intuitive sense. I have to really work a lot harder at recruiting men. And lately, I've gone to guys and said, will you help me? Point me towards some guys you think have that potential. Now, fortunately, I do have some men prayer leaders that can mentor other men. And so I will say, can you mentor so-and-so? Can you take so-and-so under your wing? Which is so helpful. But it's very important in a prayer gathering that there is a visual of men and women. We've talked about this before, so that a man doesn't walk into the room and say, oh my goodness, I don't think I fit here.
Yeah.
And a visual of men in leadership. So, and I would say we work really hard to have that kind of balance.
Is your publicity, is it female focused or male focused, or have you thought about that?
I work hard at that. Yes, I have. And it's not ethnic focused either. So if I send an announcement to our media team and they come back, we're going to have a prayer event, and they show a woman praying, I'm like, I just don't want that. It has to be something generic. Or if it's a Caucasian person praying, I don't want that. So our church is so cross-cultural, and we feel like we're just trying to mirror heaven, that we want our announcements to look like heaven.
Do you get pushback from the media team, like, why are we doing this, or are they pretty good about it?
They're really good about it.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good. That's great. Wow. You talked about discouragement with the team. F.B. Myers said, and I'm going to butcher this quote, but I love the quote. He says, unbelief looks at the situation like this. Here's the problem, and God's back here.
Ooh.
So they look at God through their circumstances, but faith looks at their circumstances through God.
Oh, so good.
And prayer leaders, to be effective, prayer leaders have to be people who are people of faith, like you talked about, and able to live above their circumstances. As a matter of fact, in the prayer rooms that I would lead, I would walk in, and the first thing I would say to people was, good morning, and then I would say, are you above or below?
That's so good.
And they would look at me like, what are you talking about at first?
Yeah.
And eventually they'd figure it out. We're either above our circumstances and living in faith, or we're below our circumstances and we're walking in unbelief. And it just became a natural thing for us to be thinking about, am I above my circumstances or am I below? Am I looking at life faithfully, or am I looking at life through unbelief? And that's such a key point that you made regarding keeping your leaders, energized, encouraged. Yeah.
I think we also have to remember we're planters, and every seed has a different germination date, right?
Yeah.
And so I have to keep saying to them, look at what's sprouting, not what hasn't sprouted yet.
Yeah. It's good.
Do you know?
Yeah. It's good. So Bonnie, what resources would you like to share with prayer leaders out there?
Okay. At this juncture, Paul, I have to talk about Threshold School of Prayer. So I think I've attended, 5 or 6 times. And each time I go, I learn so much. The presenters that you bring are just rich with history in prayer. And some of them I have to buy their sessions and listen to again and again, because what they say is so good. So I would say, for anyone out there, you need to go to Threshold Prayer School.
Bonnie, thank you. And just for the camera's sake, I was totally unsolicited, but I do appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
What else?
So I would say, if I were sharing with an average prayer person, I would say find a prayer partner. This is so important. It's basic, but it's important. People who come to me after the service for prayer at what we call the altar, we don't have a literal altar, but we still use that terminology.
Yeah.
I'll say, do you have somebody that you pray with regularly? And most of the time they say no.
Yeah.
I went through a period of intense discouragement. I felt stuck. I was working in a corporate job. I knew that there was a call of God on my life. I had no idea how to get from where I was to where God wanted me to be. I didn't even know where God wanted me to be. And this was right before I came on staff at CFTN. And I have a friend who said to me, let's meet every morning, like 7 a.m., 6 a.m. We'll pray 1 hour together. And she knew I was in a bad way, and I didn't know how to get myself out of this bad way. And so her husband left for work early. They had a spare bedroom and they had this double bed. And she would get on one side and I'd kneel on the other. And for 1 hour, we just prayed. And often we would, say, okay, what's the topic today? We'd pray. And then other times we would, what I call suck carpet, just on your face. God, you see, I don't know how to pray, know. But we did that several years. And it changed my life. Her willingness to pray with me like that changed my life. Yeah. And now, as a result, it's impacted so many other lives.
Yeah. Look at the number of lives you've impacted. Yeah. It's amazing. That's great, Bonnie.
If I were talking to a prayer leader, Paul, I would say, ask the Lord for personal intercessors. So a number of years ago, I was talking to a missions pastor and she said, I have 9 people who pray for me. And I was in a way so jealous, but another way discouraged. I thought to myself, I don't know who would pray with me. Like, who would be selfless enough, that would feel like that was their assignment from God. I have 4 people now who are praying for me, which is so incredible. Yeah. So even this session here, I, sent them a text message. Hey, will you pray for me? I know they're doing it. One of the ladies has MS, is an assisted living facility. And yet she is so mature in the Lord and she is so faithful. She's encouraging me. Wow. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So these intercessors, to me, are priceless.
Yeah, for sure. On that subject, Dean Troon, which of course, spoken at Threshold many times, he has what he calls Moses people who keep his hands lifted up.
That's so good.
And at one time he had 144 or something like that. Yeah. And so I don't know how many he has now, but he had a bunch. He still has a bunch for sure. And I remember when he first talked to me about this principle that you're talking about, I had never asked anybody to pray for me. I always thought, I'm the prayer pastor. I just need to pray for other people, and I don't need to get people to pray for me. And he was like, you're crazy, man. You need to get some people praying for you. And so my wife and I did that, and we have a team of people who pray for us. And if, like you say, if a prayer leader doesn't have that, that's vital as far as I'm concerned.
Vital.
Yeah.
I think initially it felt selfish.
Yeah, it does.
But you've got to look past yourself. Yeah. I mean, it's so not about us, It's so about what God wants to do.
Yeah.
Man, oh man. And I would say, along the same line, if a pastor wants to grow in prayer, they need to find another pastor to pray with, 1 or 2 pastors to pray with. It's really, really important.
Yeah. And that they would have a burden to do it, right?
Well, they are in such a challenging position. They have so many confidences to keep, and they've got to find someone who's, what do you call it? A steel vault.
Yeah. A vault for sure.
That can keep a confidence, and someone mature enough, to really be able to come alongside the pastor. But God has those people.
Yeah. I agree. Well, Bonnie, this has been phenomenal. I love having you here. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and thanks for your work. My goodness.
I just love it. It's a privilege.
Thanks, Bonnie.
Thanks for tuning in. We hope this episode has inspired and equipped you to take your prayer life to the next level. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and check out our website at thresholdprayer.com for more resources and information. Threshold Prayer Ministries is a nonprofit ministry that aspires to assist churches, organizations, and businesses to become people devoted to prayer. We do this by offering strategic methods, resources, and encouragement developed by prayer leaders for prayer leaders. All that we do is made possible by our generous supporters like you. So thank you for your support in donations and in prayer. Together, we can transform lives and communities through the power of prayer. In Jesus' name.